on foot and stabbed repeatedly. Out on the lake, a fisherman hears the couple's cries and summons police.
And I believe we just finished dinner when I got a call from the office indicating a couple of kids that were at Lake Marias had been stabbed.
The victims are hanging on. Ken is to the hospital to get their statements. Meanwhile, a little over an hour after the attack, Napa County Police Officer Dave Slate takes in a call.
I answered the phone. I said, Napa Police Department, Officer Slate. And the voice on the other end says, I want to report a murder, no, a double murder. And the voice on the other end of the phone said, I'm the one that did it.
So we sent people out around town to see if we could find a telephone off the hook at a public phone booth. And a roving reporter for the local media found this telephone at a phone booth right downtown Napa.
The phone booth is less than 5 blocks from Napa's police station. Forensics dusts for prints and comes away with a palm print. Back at the hospital, the victims are identified. The woman, 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard, never regains consciousness and dies from 10 stab wounds to the back and chest. Her companion, 20-year-old Brian Hartnell, survives and tells Detective Narlow his story.
I kept trying to talk to him.
He said that Cecilia was kind of startled. And Brian said, what's the matter? She said, well, there's a man standing over there, and he's staring at us. And then a little while later, she heard another noise, and that's when she saw the suspect come out from behind a tree. She looked up and she says, oh my God, there he is again. He's wearing a mask.
The man who approaches them is about 5'10". He's wearing gloves, carrying a gun in one hand, and has a long bayonet-style knife at his side. Over his head, the man wears a black executioner-style hood. On his chest is the crossed circle, the sign of the zodiac. The masked man uses pre-cut lengths of rope to bind his victims. Then he pulls out the knife.
And then he supposedly said, well, you know I'm going to have to kill you. And Brian is supposedly have said, well, kill me first because I couldn't stand to see Cecilia hurt.
After talking to Hartnell, Narlow realizes he is not dealing with your run-of-the-mill murderer. Clues left at the crime scene underscore this point. Scrawled on the side of Brian Hartnell's car is a message from a man who now calls himself the Zodiac.
It had the sign of the Zodiac, the circle with the cross emblem. Then he had the date, September 27th, 1969. Underneath that, he found a knife, which naturally attracted our attention because it was directly related to the crime itself, and he's taking credit for it.
Also scrawled on the side of the car, 12/20/68 and 7/4/69, the dates of the 2 Vallejo attacks. The killer leaves no doubt. He is responsible for all 3 attacks and wants everyone to know it. His next attack ups the ante even further as Zodiac turns up in the big city. Downtown San Francisco, a little before 10 p.m. Cabby Paul Stein picks up a fare in front of the St. Francis Hotel and takes a 10-minute drive to the big money neighborhood of Presidio Heights. The fare directs Stein to stop at the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, puts a 9mm pistol to the cabbie's head, and pulls the trigger. Across the street and up a flight of stairs, a teenage girl happens to look out the window. She sees a man get out of the cab and begin to wipe down the outside of the car. After a bit, he walks down Cherry Street toward 1,400 acres of park known as the Presidio. The teen's brother picks up the phone and calls police.
217 was called with the radio code meaning the shooting had possibly come down.
Shortly after 10, San Francisco patrolman Armin Palisetti responds to the call and approaches the cab.
It was actually pretty boring. I looked in and the cab driver was laying down and his head was basically resting on the floorboard of the car. The car was full of blood. The gentleman's eyes were open, which was a very bad sign indicating that he was dead.
Palisetti takes down a description of the shooter, a white man, reddish hair, and a crew cut, about 5 feet 10. In the moments after the attack, one patrol comes across such a man, fitting the suspect's general description and walking away from the shooting.
The other unit stopped somebody, a white man, and asked if he had seen anything suspicious or anybody in the area. And that person said, yes, a man just ran into the procedure.
The patrol lets the man go. Later, many would wonder if they let Zodiac himself slip away into the night.
The conjecture is that this was the Zodiac. Was it? I don't know. He didn't see any blood on that person's clothing. And believe me, based on the crime scene, there would have been a lot of blood on that person.
Back at the crime scene, Paul Stein is pronounced dead. In his cab, a spent shell casing from the 9mm slug that took his life. And the best piece of evidence in the case, fingerprints smudged in blood and thus almost certainly left by the killer. Detectives believe Paul Stein's killer has made his mistake, and his capture is just a matter of time. 3 days later, another letter arrives at the Chronicle, and San Francisco realizes Paul Stein's killer is not just another pretty face. On October 10, 1969, San Francisco cabbie Paul Stein is shot execution style in the front seat of his car. 3 days later, the San Francisco Chronicle receives a letter, double-posted and addressed in blue felt-tipped pens. The return address has been replaced by a cross circle. The first line reads, "This is the Zodiac speaking."
I can remember the Chronicle publishing a letter, and it was, "This is the Zodiac speaking," and he described the murder scene. And I found that quite chilling.
More chilling than the letter's detail is what accompanies it. Pieces of Paul Stein's bloody shirt.
The piece of shirt in the letter made it very clear that the person that was writing was the murderer.
In it, Zodiac taunts police. He writes, "The San Francisco police could have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly, instead of holding road races with the motorcycles, seeing who could make the most noise." Then Zodiac shares his plans for the future, increasing the quotient of terror exponentially.
He said he's going to shoot school children. I'm going to shoot them as they came bounding off the bus.
School children make fine targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
Later on, he's got diagrams of bombs. You got an electronic eye. It's going to count the numbers of windows in the school bus. It's at the height of a school bus, buried in the cliffside. As soon as the school bus goes by, it's going to detonate and kill the kids. Two diagrams. They look at them, these things will work.
This guy is a pathological psycho killer. There's no doubt about it.
With the Stein murder and subsequent letter, Zodiac is finally where he wants to be, at the very center of attention, holding a major American city under his thumb. Mel Nikolai is a special agent with the California Department of Justice.
You had to believe it. I mean, you couldn't discount it. You had to take it into consideration because he'd already killed several people. And why wouldn't he shoot some kids?
Now, of course, the reaction was they've got small fixed-wing planes flying behind the buses. People volunteered their own time. There's guards, there's squad cars.
It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. It is your worst fear, to have children threatened and to have the possibility of children killed for no purpose whatsoever other than to kill.
With confirmed Zodiac attacks in Vallejo, Napa, and now San Francisco, the chase is on. An army of detectives hoping to catch the country's most notorious killer, and in the process, perhaps make themselves a career.
One officer told me, he said, this is the ace of cases. The guy who solves this is going to be the greatest detective there ever was. And so what do you have? You had competing police departments in Napa and Vallejo and San Francisco, and eventually Riverside, California, and even Oakland. And these people are all competing against each other.
In my mind, it was kind of like a poker game. There's these different police from different agencies where they're kind of like holding their cards and I don't know, what do you got?
Hoping to head off such problems, Mel Nikolai convenes an official Zodiac task force, a place where police could share information and hopefully not step on each other's toes.
San Francisco and Napa and Solano and Vallejo PD, they all came together pretty fast. Once they determined who, they're all working on the same individual.
It was kind of a brainstorming session. We'd bring our files up there and all the detectives would get together that are working on the case and make sure that we were touching base with one another and they were all privy to the same information.
The task force focuses on its best leads. The bloody print pulled from Paul Stein's cab, and the Zodiac letters written most likely in the killer's hand.
The letter forms are rather childish, unskilled.
John Shimoda is one of several handwriting experts poring over script from the Zodiac letters.
I could myself zero in looking for the letter K because 3-stroke letter K, and usually people don't make that type of K with that type of stroke.
Using handwriting experts and fingerprint cards, detectives shuffle through hundreds of suspects and field thousands of calls from an anxious public.
Phone calls from all over the country, California and all over. They were calling names of people they thought might be responsible. Everybody had an idea who it might be,
Bits and pieces of information, leads and tips from people who want to help catch the Zodiac killer have been pouring into police headquarters here at the Hall of Justice for the last few days.
We were getting hundreds and hundreds of them. We didn't have computers in those days, and all we had was a little file index, and we put the name on the suspect on a 3x5 card, and put the physical description down and how we eliminated them through prints or handwriting, and that was it.
While the task force struggles, Zodiac enjoys himself writing more letters and reveling in his newfound status as a celebrity.
You were dealing with a highly intelligent man who wanted to tell you who he was, and yet couldn't. He wanted the publicity, he wanted the ego, and I think the publicity eventually became the driving force behind his crimes.
In one greeting card sent to the Chronicle, Zodiac demands that the people of San Francisco start wearing some nice Zodiac buttons. Zodiac writes, "Everyone else has these buttons like the peace symbol, Black Power. Well, it would cheer me up considerably if I saw a lot of people wearing my button." In a second letter, Zodiac writes, "The bomb is set up like this," and then provides police with a page of schematics. Zodiac ends with, "I hope you had fun trying to figure out who I killed."
He called it his game of outdoor chess. And I think what Zodiac battled with the police, that became it. It was him against the police. He outwitted them, he gave them clues, he told them when he was going to strike.
Zodiac even corresponds with San Francisco's rich and famous. Prominent among them, San Francisco attorney Melvin Ballard, who receives a letter with a scrap of Stein's shirt in it. Eventually, however, the Zodiac decides it is time to stop writing letters and begin killing again. Five months after the Stein murder, Kathleen Johns and her daughter travel a highway 65 miles southeast of San Francisco. A car pulls alongside and motions to Johns, who pulls over.
Says, "There's something wrong with your tire. Let me fix it." So he gets out and he goes around back. "It's okay now," he says. "It's deserted." She drives a couple feet. Tire rolls off, and he's loosened the lug nuts. Well, he says, "Oh my God, this is terrible. Let me drive you somewhere." Well, as soon as he gets going, he turns off the road. And for the next hour, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get you."
The car winds down empty country roads. The driver, a stocky white man, talks in a monotone, telling Johns he is going to kill her, and then throw the baby out after her. Finally, the driver comes upon a freeway and begins to turn.
He starts to turn into the wrong way onto a freeway. He's paused in the back. She leaps out. Got her baby, pregnant, runs into a field, throws herself face down. He's coming through the field with his knife. You come back, I won't hurt you. And she's absolutely silent. So he finally gives up because a truck comes around the bend, illuminates him in the road, and takes off.
A driver passing by takes Johns to the local police station where she spots a composite on the wall, a sketch of the celebrated Zodiac.
There's the sketch made from the witnesses. That's him. That's the guy.
In July, the Chronicle receives another letter, verified by handwriting experts as coming from the Zodiac's hand. In it, the author writes about giving a woman and her baby a rather interesting ride for a couple of hours one evening, a few months back. John's encounter is the last verified sighting of the Zodiac. In subsequent letters, the killer hints that he might go silent and continue to kill without any further letters.
Zodiac did something really clever. He's really playing with people's minds. He says, I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to kill him. I'm going to make him look like accident.
Zodiac's last known letter is received in January of 1974. In it, the killer praises a newly released film called The Exorcist and gives the police a final body count. 37 people to date, the Zodiac claims he has killed. After this final letter, Zodiac makes good on his promise and disappears.
Back in those days, nobody wanted to say, well, he stopped, right? Because if you come out and you sell the sandwich, says, well, it's all over with now, he stopped. And then 2 days later, he goes out and shoots somebody, hey, I haven't stopped yet, see, here's proof. You know, don't egg the guy on in any way. Everybody's kind of quiet.
Detectives, however, already have a line on the man they believe to be the Zodiac. A man who lives in a trailer filled with small dead animals. On September 27, 1969, Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell are attacked as they picnic on the shores of Lake Berryessa. Their assailant wields a knife and wears an executioner's hood with the Zodiac symbol on his chest. Cecilia dies from multiple stab wounds. Brian lives but never sees the Zodiac's face. On that same day, 36-year-old Arthur Lee Allen tells family members he is going scuba diving in Lake Berryessa. He returns that evening, covered in blood, with a knife on the front seat of his car. A tip is phoned in to police. Take a look at Arthur Lee Allen as the Zodiac. George Bawart is a detective with the Vallejo PD.
John Lynch interviewed him, and Arthur Lee Allen told him, yeah, I told everybody I was going to Berryessa, but instead I went to the ocean seaside.
Breaking into grocery stores and stealing a bicycle. In 1949, after time in a juvenile, a dead-end kid who has lived in an emotional blind alley is happy today. He's going to Boys Town. Manson ran away 4 days later. Now just 13, he stole cars, broke into stores, and committed his first armed robberies. He was then sent to the Indiana School for Boys, where he claims he was raped and repeatedly beaten. He ran away 18 times. Now, the punishments escalated after he stole cars, committed armed robbery, and held up gas stations. He went from the National Training School for Boys to Natural Bridge Camp to federal reformatories at Petersburg, Virginia, and Chillicothe, Ohio, where he was paroled in 1954. He was just 19 years old. Around this time in Los Angeles, one of Manson's future followers, Patricia Krenwinkel, was a little girl. Her comfortable childhood could not have been more different from Charles Manson's, but even her home was not without its sadness.
During the time I was brought up, nothing was talked about. I mean, my parents' dissolution of their marriage, you don't talk about that. You don't talk about problems in the home. I never felt like I had a sense of who I really wanted to be or become.
In 1949, Leslie Van Houten was born into a solid middle-class family in Altadena, California. From an early age, she wanted to help the world. Her parents, too, would divorce.
I was always very creative girl, young girl, you know, artistic. But I never, for a while, I wanted to be a school teacher. Somewhere along the line, I got distracted and I lost motivation. I believe that I was desperately seeking someone that I could love and hold on to and call my own. That somehow my dad leaving had left a space there.
In January 1955, back in McMecken, the 20-year-old Charles Manson married 17-year-old Rosalie Jean Willis. He held odd jobs, but continued to steal cars, driving them across state lines.
1944, I went to juvenile hall. I didn't get out till 1954. I got a little girl named Rose, stole some guns, went to Georgia, burglarized a store, got a straw hat full of dimes, and came to L.A. I turned 21 years old in the L.A. County Jail. I wasn't out but a hot second. I've been in jail all my life.
It was one of the curious facts about Charles Manson. He would often manage to commit small-time crimes that nonetheless violated federal laws and would bring tough penalties. A suspended sentence turned into a 10-year term after he violated probation on a charge of forging a very small treasury check.
I was struck by something initially, and that is that he had been sentenced to 10 years for attempting to cash a $43 treasury check. He did 7.5 years.
From 1951 to 1967, Charles Manson's rap sheet shows a range of crimes from mail theft to forgery to running prostitutes. It was at the end of the 20th century that Manson developed a skill in the guitar and an interest in music that would play an important part in later events. The man who taught him the steel guitar was an aging fellow prisoner, the renowned Depression-era gangster Alvin Creepy Karpis. More important, it was in prison with its rigid codes of behavior and its hierarchy that Manson developed his way of looking at the world.
See, I never realized that people outside are much different than the people inside. People inside,
I only see
you get punched.
1, 2.
You get misused. You don't lie to the lieutenant. Lieutenant don't lie to you. There's a certain amount of truth
6 people
in prison.
come here.
And being raised in prison, I was raised pretty much in the light of that truth.
He did his own time. He pretty much refused to be programmed, to go along with the expectations of the prison staff.
Why did you guys
He apparently spent a lot of time playing guitar, writing music. He did attend the class, did very well in a power positive thinking class, which I always thought was a part of his style.
He was released from prison in 1967. It's been said that he asked not to be released. He's now spent more than half of his 32 years inside, and prison was the only real home he'd ever known. What's more, Charles Manson had never known life with a real family. That would make a family of his own very appealing. Prison may have meant a life of little change for Charles Manson, but life outside was changing radically. It was a far different world now from the one he'd known before prison, and was one where his particular skills would serve him well. It was the mid-1960s, and the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco was, for hippies and others escaping the mainstream, the promised land.
What we saw at its peak were literally thousands of flower children all over the country, all over the world, attracted to this movement. Moths to a Flames, summer in San Francisco. There was a philosophy here that was totally revolutionary that they'd not heard before, and this was the epicenter of it. A lot of very young, creative, exploring people came there, but then you started to see a shift where more disturbed, sicker, more drug-involved people started to come.
The hallucinogenic drugs like LSD were being replaced by stimulant drugs, speed particularly, that led to compulsion and paranoia, and innocence was giving way to violence.
You may recall a song, the lyrics of which were, if you come to San Francisco, you better wear a flower in your hair. By 1967, if you came to San Francisco, you needed to wear a 45 in your belt. It had changed that fast. The kids were still coming from all over the United States with the same set of expectations, but the welcoming committee was very, very different. There was a brand of street theater that was hard to imagine.
If we all coming up to the picnic area, all the stores out in this area, they're taken over by the beatniks, and we see them in all shapes and sizes. I think this one is a girl walking in front of us. She has a hair ribbon, but it's hard to tell.
It was a scene where if you grew your hair and talked the talk, you fit in.
This was the scene which Charles Manson entered on his release from prison in 1967.
When he came out, he initially told me that there was nothing I could do, that that he could go back to prison. He was not afraid of it. He was not going to do parole, if parole was going to be onerous. He was clearly an antisocial personality. He was superficial, he was glib, and he was very adaptable.
And when I got out, all your children would come to me because they never had anybody tell them the truth.
He sized up people, I think, fairly quickly and fairly accurately. I think that's a skill you learn in prisons.
He said, so your father just kicked you out of the house. And that started it.
Lynette Squeaky Fromm joined up with Manson early on.
It was easy to talk to him. And we talked on a number of levels. His mind intrigued me.
Charlie was what he needed to be at any given time.
Pat Krenwinkel was another early member of Manson's growing family.
I met Charlie when I was living at the beach with my sister, and she came home and said to go down to a friend's house, which I did, and Charlie was there, and he was playing the guitar. And so I was introduced to him there. And that night, we slept together, and I felt really loved by him almost immediately. Mostly because I think at that point I was really desperate for someone to care. When we made love, all I remember is just crying to this man. It was like, because he said, oh, you're beautiful. I couldn't believe that. I just started crying.
Manson's family grew to include men. One of them was the young, all-American Texan, Charles Tex Watson.
Charlie used sex for, number one, when people would come and he wanted power over them, men, he would offer them whatever women he had. And he had certain women he always put out front, which he called his friends street girls. They were the ones that he thought were the most beautiful, the ones that would be the most enticing. And that's what he would do. I mean, he was an excellent pimp.
Charles Manson was not only attracting followers, he was also exercising more control over them.
Whatever he believed, I would believe. And I would say, and I would spout off.
I began to get increasingly uncomfortable with the amount of control and the way in which he used them. And you could see his sense of power and control growing.
But in Northern California, at least, the family was monitored by outsiders.
I saw him on a weekly basis. He would bring the girls into the office. It was a big occasion. I would go out to a home and see them. There was always that string. There was always some reality.
The family left San Francisco in the summer of 1967 and began an odyssey up and down the California coast. Moving from place to place was one way Manson kept his followers entertained enough to stay. They started spending more time in the Los Angeles area. There, Manson hoped to make a name for himself in rock and roll.
I think he felt that once he got down there, things were going to be very, very different. He had contacts with the Beach Boys.
It was through the women that Manson made his connection with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. In Los Angeles, Wilson picked up two of the family women hitchhiking and took them home. Soon, Manson and the rest of the family showed up and moved in with Wilson for several months. Then, through Wilson, Manson did some recording, but nothing came of the sessions. Manson was always bitter that his music would remain unheard.
They came to the ranch, lady. I didn't go to them, they came to me. You're stealing my music every day. You're writing my songs, you're playing my game.
In August of 1968, longtime family member Susan Atkins found the family a new home, an old Western movie set and now riding stable owned by an 80-year-old half-blind man named George Spahn. Leslie Van Houten joined the family in the summer of 1968.
You know, all very fun in the beginning. Innocent.
At first, the family reveled in the crumbling movie set and the beautiful countryside around it. They play-acted roles they might have taken in old movies. It was like summer camp, and Charles Manson was head counselor.
It was a great place, actually. We could make anything we wanted out of it. It was like having the Our Gang set, you know. You could turn it into anything.
The whole idea was to let time disappear. There was no time. We were all living now. Now was the only time.
See, at first the magical mystery tour was that we would be cowboys or gypsies or pirates, and every day it was to wear a different role so that we would get more out of ourselves, and every day was Halloween.
Losing oneself, killing old egos, and replacing them with Manson and his very particular view of the world. It was the serious goal of all that play acting that Manson directed.
If you wipe away somebody's identity, say society is corrupt, forget about everything you ever learned, but then you substitute your own philosophy. It's like wiping the blackboard clean and then introducing your philosophy, and then you become the absolute leader.
Bit by bit, the family became one with Manson.
One of his things was to stop you during the day, and he'd put your palms up to his, and then he'd move them in any direction that he could. Or he'd make a series of faces, and then you were supposed to try to keep up with them. And the whole thing was always geared toward just complete mirroring of him.
One powerful way that Manson maintained control was through drugs, in particular LSD.
Well, we took hundreds of trips together.
The acid trips were exercises in total control.
With Charlie, he actually did almost like drug programming. I mean, he was the focal point at all times. And what seems so amazing is that he somehow, because acid is a very powerful drug, and it's like, I would feel like totally out of control, and yet I would watch him and he would seem totally in control. One of the things when I look back on it is I didn't really see him take acid. I don't think he did. The idea was to get rid of all the conditioning, to die in yourself. So he would hold you up and say something to you. Say, see, I can see your mother on you. It's still the conditioning. You know, you haven't gotten rid of it. You're not dead yet.
Sometimes he would reenact the crucifixion when we were on LSD. And it was very realistic. I would die for you. And then the questions would begin. Would you die for me?
And what was the philosophy that Manson was offering? It had begun with a notion of oneness and the power of love. But over time, it grew steadily more paranoid. The messages to the family grew steadily darker. There was no right or wrong, and life and death were really the same thing. In fact, death could be a welcome step on the way to a better world. And in the fall and winter of 1968, as Manson saw himself more and more a lone visionary, he and the family spent more and more time in a place that only increased their sense of isolation. A remote outpost in Death Valley, Barker Ranch.
We really weren't in touch. We were allowed to listen to the Beatles and the Moody Blues and Manson's music.
Nonetheless, Manson was aware of what was going on in the nation's cities. Since 1966, city after city had seen rioting in black neighborhoods. The cry for black power was being heard alongside the ever stronger actions against the war in Vietnam.
We're gonna make Vietnam look like a holiday. Because if America don't come round, America should be burnt down.
The family moved back to Los Angeles in January of 1969. Then the paranoia increased even more in early July, when Manson thought he'd killed a black drug dealer he also thought was a Black Panther. Now convinced that the full fury of the Panthers was soon to descend on the family, bitter about his failure to record his music, and most importantly, certain that a giant race war was impending, Charles Manson spent July and early August tense, paranoid, and angry. On the night of August 9, 1969, at a house on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, actress Sharon Tate, wife of movie director Roman Polanski and 8 months pregnant, was at home with her friends, the hairstylist Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, and Roman's friend Wojtek Frykowski. A young man named Stephen Parent was also on the site, visiting the home's caretaker. That night's murders began with some preparations at Spawn Ranch.
I was with the children. We were in a trailer. I was with someone else, and we were in a trailer. And Charlie came and woke me up. And he said, "Get up. I want you to go somewhere." He said, "Get in the car." And I was in the car with Tex and Linda Kasabian, Susan Atkins. And he said, "Do everything that Tex says." And then we walked.
Tex Watson went onto the property first. When he came upon Stephen Parent in his car, he shot him 4 times.
We heard gunshots. He came back and told us to come with him. And we followed. Trying to get into the house, he eventually, I think he went through a window or something, returned to the front door and allowed the rest of us to enter. There was a man that he was dealing with, and I think that was Jay Sebring, I believe. He had him on the floor or something, and he was going to tie him up. And he asked Susan to check the back rooms. And what began to happen is a scuffle started taking place between Tex and the man and Jay Sebring, and he shot him. And everyone else at that point obviously was getting really frightened and scared. And what eventually took place is that there was an attempt to tie everyone up. And when there was an attempt to tie everyone up, eventually Abigail Folger started to get herself undone, and she took off. I ran after her with an upraised knife, and we went out through a back door out onto the lawn. And I started stabbing her. I ran her down, and I began to stab her. I remember her saying, "I'm already dead."
It was Tex Watson who delivered most of the fatal blows at the house that night.
We were so locked in, it's just okay, this must be this, and we just become more more like a robot, somehow this must bring it.
The scene left behind was grotesque. There was blood everywhere. A rope-tied blazer on Sharon Tate's neck was looped over a beam and tied around Jay Sebring's neck. Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, lay on the front lawn. Stephen Parent lay dead in his car. And on the front door, Sharon Tate's blood was the word pig. Besides being shot and bludgeoned, the victims had been stabbed a total of 102 times.
When I got back to the ranch, we got out of the car.
Okay. I like that place.
Charlie came up and asked everybody how it went. But that was the first time I looked at him and I said, "Charlie, they were so young." And he just said, "Go with Tex."
The next night, another attack. This time it was at the home of grocery company executive Lino LaBianca and his wife Rosemary in a very different section of Los Angeles. Manson knew the house because he'd attended a party at a neighboring home in the past. Along this second night would be Leslie Van Houten, anxious to prove her loyalty to Manson.
I knew that people would die. I knew that they would be killed.
Manson, Van Houten, Krenwinkel, Watson, Atkins, and Linda Kasabian drove around for a while before they stopped at the LaBianca house. Manson went inside, tied up the LaBiancas, and then left.
Pat had a knife, and I tried to hold Mrs. LaBianca down, and I couldn't do it. And Pat went to stab her, and she couldn't do it.
Leslie was still trying to hold her because she was struggling, and I went and got Tex.
And Tex went into the bedroom, and I stood in the hallway, and I looked into an empty room in the den, and I just stayed there, and I didn't move. And I have no sound memory of Mrs. LaBianca dying. All I remember is staring into that room. And then Tex turned me around and handed me the knife, and he said, "Do something." because Manson had told him to make sure that all of us got our hands dirty. And I stabbed Mrs. LaBianca in the lower back about 16 times.
The scene at the LaBiancas was no less macabre than that at the Tate House. A carving fork protruded from Lino LaBianca's stomach and a knife from his throat. And the word war was carved in his flesh. Mrs. LaBianca was in the bedroom, her head covered by a pillowcase, with a lamp cord tied around her neck. On the walls, written in their blood, were the words, "Death to pigs," and "Rise." And on the refrigerator door, the words, "Helter Skelter."
I said, if you're gonna do something, leave something witchy. Just like I would tell you, if you're gonna do something, do it well. And leave something witchy. Leave a sign to let the world know that you were there. Have a good day.
The two victims had been stabbed a total of 67 times. Meanwhile, the news of the first night's murders had hit L.A. like an earthquake.
There was a terrible fear, a terrible trepidation on the part of the Hollywood community that this killing, this ritualistic killing, had something to do with celebrityism. And so a lot of the high-profile Hollywood stars, apparently Sinatra left town. Tony Bennett was living at the Beverly Hills Hotel, one of the bungalows. He moved inside to be safe. Steve McQueen supposedly drove around with a gun in the front seat of the car now, all reacting to the Sharon Tate killings.
It was amazing. Everyone's got a piece of the story. Wherever you went, there was somebody saying, "Did you know that they found the thing?" And
It seemed everyone wanted a gun. 200 guns were sold by one Beverly Hills store in 2 days. It took 2 weeks to get a locksmith. Police were interviewing many celebrities, and some became more careful about their habits. One local in the film business said toilets are flushing all over Beverly Hills. The entire Los Angeles sewer system is stoned. Now the rumors start to fly.
The first rumor that hit, as far as the crimes were concerned, was that it was drug-related. It was a drug hit. And on top of that, it was Roman Polanski's wife. People knew about Polanski's film, Knife in the Water, all of these strange, dark, mystical movies involving drugs and sex and killings.
Sharon not only didn't use drugs. In the beginning, there were those who thought Roman had an involvement in this.
It was conjecture Polanski quickly denied.
It was terrible for him when he came back for the funeral, and Warren Beatty was telling me this. I mean, people thought he somehow had something to do with it. Of course, he didn't.
In spite of the obvious similarities between the Tate and LaBianca murders, the police believed that the second crime was merely a copycat incident based on news reports of the first, and the two investigations were run quite separately. During the investigation, the family was actually arrested and then released on an unrelated charge of auto theft. They then headed to the safety of Barker Ranch in Death Valley. On October 10th, the family was rounded up on new charges of auto theft and arson. And while they were in jail, the LA murder cases broke open. Family member Susan Atkins was implicated by another member in an earlier crime. Jailed in LA, she blabbed to cellmates about the Tate and LaBianca murders. The more you kill, the better you like it, she told them. Then one cellmate repeated the stories to the police. In December of 1969, nearly 4 months after the crimes, Charles Manson and 5 family members were charged with the Tate and LaBianca murders. What some called the crime of the century would now move on to a trial that would mesmerize a city. The trial of Charles Manson, Pat Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Susan Atkins for the Tate and LaBianca murders began on June 15, 1970. Manson demanded and was refused permission to serve as his own attorney. Still, from the beginning, it was clear that Manson was in complete control of the defense.
You have to realize that I viewed Manson as being the main defendant. To convict his co-defendants and have him walk out of court, I think, would have been an unsuccessful prosecution. The problem was that Manson was not at the murder scene. He did not physically participate in these murders. So I had to bring him in by way of circumstantial evidence, and also by the law of conspiracy.
At the heart of the prosecution effort was the bizarre story of Helter Skelter, the stranger-than-fiction doomsday scenario that Charles Manson had woven from his earlier certainty of a coming race war. Helter Skelter was a name he'd taken from a Beatles song.
Manson envisioned that white people would turn against the black man if they thought the black man had committed these 7 murders.
Okay.
And ultimately there would be a civil war between blacks and whites out on the street. During the war, he told them, we're going to hide out in the bottomless pit in the desert, a place he derived from Revelation 9, a chapter in the last book of the New Testament. Manson foresaw that the black man would win this war. But later on, he said the black man, because of inexperience, would simply not be able to handle the reins of power. So you'd have to look around at those white people who had survived, who had escaped from Helter Skelter. And he said, we'll come out of the bottomless pit.
After you're done, use it.
Quoting Manson, we'll send black down his way to pick cotton.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.
And we'll take over the leadership of the world.
The chief prosecution witness was Linda Kasabian, who had driven the car on the night of the Tate murders. She agreed to testify in return for immunity.
Can you get out of my way?
The mood around the trial and throughout L.A. was as bizarre as the accused themselves.
It may be more than 6 months before the Tate case finally goes to trial here at the Hall of Justice, but Hollywood isn't waiting. 2 movies about the mass murders already are in the works. One producer said his film will concentrate on the hippie clan charged with murder and explain on the screen why they might have done it.
Day after day, Manson would come into court and by turns intimidate and amuse.
He was playing the people. He was playing to the courtroom. He was playing to the press.
We had quite a few staring sessions.
I can only hold one more mini.
Stare at the jury, and they would turn away. He'd turn around and stare at spectators.
During the trial, as in their lives before, the 3 women took all their instructions from Manson.
The entire proceeding was scripted. By trial every day with me,
Come on, go to the
decide
circle.
that today I want you each to stand up and hold your hands in some stupid symbols. You're going to get up and scream. You know, each day was scripted.
Come on.
And that day we proceeded through the events. With Manson, he believed that
Let's
everything
go.
we did was creating some picture that was going to go out in the universe and somehow change it bend it towards his will.
The daily march of Van Houten, Atkins, and Krenwinkel smiling and singing was unnerving to anyone who saw it on the news. The song they were singing was one that Manson had written. After disrupting the proceedings a number of times, the rest of the family was banned from the courtroom.
Does
So
anybody
they
have a
moved to
spare
the
shotgun
hallways
for me?
and kept a vigil outside. At
spare
first,
one.
the mood was almost festive.
He saw them every day. You know, come on, Squeaky. You can't really be serious about that, you know. And we would banter back and forth, and so there was a joviality.
But continuing to shock the courtroom, Manson carved an X into his forehead in late July to symbolize his removal from society. The following weekend, the 3 girls followed suit. National attention on the trial included unwelcome notice from the highest level. President Nixon spoke of Charles Manson in a speech on August 3rd.
There was a man who was guilty, directly or indirectly, of 8 murders without reason. Here's a man yet who, as far as the coverage was concerned, appeared to be rather a glamorous figure.
And the next day, a smiling Charles Manson held the headline up to the jury as the defense demanded a mistrial. It was denied in spite of the defense team's best efforts.
The President of the United States says somebody's guilty. What recourse do you have? You answer the question.
Inside the courtroom, the most dramatic moment occurred on October 5th, 1970, when Manson lunged 10 feet towards the judge. He was restrained and the trial continued.
It certainly was within earshot.
On November 16th, the prosecution rested, and the defense rested without calling a single witness. Struggles with Manson and changes in the defense team were constant, but there was still alarm when defense lawyer Ronald Hughes did not show up in court. His body was later discovered in a wilderness area. One ex-family member has since claimed he was murdered for disagreeing with Manson over Leslie Van Houten's defense. On January 25th, 1971, after 9 days of deliberation, the jury found each defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and murder in the first degree. In a separate trial, Tex Watson was also found guilty and sentenced to death. In the penalty phase of the trial, the women did testify and tried to exonerate Manson. And now the instructions from Manson were changing.
One of the things that Charlie always promoted about himself was, I don't lie. And all of a sudden he was asking every one of us to lie on a daily basis about something. Oh, say this, say that, but I didn't do that. And it was like, you lie, a God lies.
On March 9th, the jury called for the death penalty for all 4 defendants, a finding the judge then upheld. In protest, the women shaved their heads.
Before that clerk reads that verdict, you don't know whether he's going to say life or death. It's a very tense, suspenseful moment. And I looked over at Manson, and his hands were trembling. Now here's someone who always spoke about the beauty of death. He was always telling everyone, death is a beautiful thing, and maybe when you kill these people, you're doing them a favor, they don't even realize it. But I was with him for 9.5 months, and he fought very hard for his own life, so that was just pure hypocrisy on his part.
The defendants faced the death penalty now. To at least one of them, it was a kind of relief.
I was more than willing to go to the gas chamber. I didn't fear it. The death penalty for me at the time it almost justified my not having to deal with what I had done. It was the eye for an eye. They're going to kill me. I don't have to deal with it.
And then in 1972, the Supreme Court overturned the death penalty. Death sentences were commuted to terms of life imprisonment. In the case of Charles Manson, there was a certain irony involved.
He told me after the trial, Bugliosi says, you haven't achieved anything here. He said, all you've done is send me back to where I came from. But I said, well, yeah, Charlie, that's true, but as far as I know, you've never been in the green room before. The green room is a reference to San Quentin gas chamber. The next year, I was driving my car, and the car radio was on. And I heard where the U.S. Supreme Court had set aside the death penalty, Furman versus Georgia. And the very first thought that came into my mind is that what Manson had told me at the end of the trial was true. That all he did is send him back to where he came from, and he doesn't mind prison life. So in a sense, and I hate to say this, in a sense, Manson is beating the rap.
It was 1972, and Pat Krenwinkel and Leslie Van Houten were still young women, with a lifetime ahead of them. A lifetime to face what they had done. More than 30 years after the murders at the Tate and LaBianca homes, Charles Manson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Tex Watson are all still in prison serving life terms. All have been reviewed for parole numerous times, but it's always been denied.
You can have the rest of it and put me back in my cell. This is all I really want.
Charles Manson has not even attended all of his hearings.
There's a decision among you, is there?
Now Charles Manson is moving into his 70s, and Tex Watson and the women are in their 50s. To listen to Manson, Pat Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten today is to hear very different memories of those events well over a quarter century ago.
If anything, the older I get, the harder it is. Mrs. LaBianca was younger than I am now. I took away all that life.
I see blood in here every day. Every day someone's getting shot, someone's getting cut, someone's getting beat. I've lived in that all my life, woman. That don't wrinkle up my forehead. You can pile out 100 dead bodies up in front of my cell and it don't set me to do nothing.
Every day I wake up and know that I'm a destroyer of the most precious thing, which is life. And living with that is the most difficult thing of all. And I do that because that's what I deserve, is to wake up every morning and know that.
You know, it didn't happen overnight. He spent a lot of time taking middle-class girls and remolding them.
I never broke nobody's will. I never told anybody to do anything other than what they wanted to do.
Oh, Charlie's just absolutely lying. There wasn't one thing done that was even allowed to be done without his expressed permission.
Wait a minute. I said, you do what's best for you. You do what you feel is right. You do what you think is right. Now, whatever you think is right, it's got to be right. All I'm doing is I'm walking with you. I'm walking the line with you, and I'm holding the line with you. What you do is up to you. It's got nothing to do with me.
You know, I take offense to the fact that 25 years later Manson doesn't own up to his share in this. I take offense to that. I take responsibility for my part. And part of my responsibility was helping create him.
Every once in a while I get letters from children. And they seem to think that what we did is all right. There is nothing that we did that is all right. Nothing.
He was not Jesus Christ or Satan. He was a very odd, bizarre, high-energy little antisocial who had some poor, confused, middle-class dropouts who decided to follow him. And he got into a situation where he had enormous power over these people, and he pulled it all together into this incoherent, hateful kind of plan. And there was no one there to say, Charlie, girls, this is crazy.
Saturday at 8, AD is issuing you a search warrant. Search for justice on American Justice.
We know we have our man.
Search for evidence on cold case files.
DNA is like the finger of God pointing down.
Search for truth on City Confidential.
I'm selling sex like other people are selling soda pop.
You'll find them all beginning at 8 tomorrow on A&E.
Thank you very much.
Like two ethnies. There was the one that was out there during the day, and then there was the one at night that was digging up the grave.
Every time you would call the office with some new detail, it got bigger and bigger.
Among the things they found were bowls that had been made from the tops of human skulls.
Things like this just don't happen in the 1950s in a small town like Plainfield.
It's not the nature of man to do the things that he did. It's an aberration.
For more than a century, the movies had brought our most vivid nightmares to life. Often, the fear is conjured from phantoms.
Hunting for that intel like we discussed before, getting towards B storage, really strong position to have the AWP, found the bomb, phase a little bit disorganized, but Exist saved them, and it will be 7-2 now. They need to find consecutive rounds, they can't keep getting reset at this point. Luckily, there will be entirely Eco coming in, so maybe a chance then to really get into this game. They once again look very flat. I really think they should just focus on maybe more assertive plays, use that firepower like Captain Mo is right now. Can he get another with the Deagle? Not quite. Exist saving the day once again. Guardian will miss a shot and be punished. The USP of all weapons? 3-on-3 still as somebody gets an AK-6. You need to be careful here. Low HP and he's going to burn.
Been one of the closest rounds we've seen, and now, but 3 players about to come his way. PT50 in hand, he's been the star for time.
How are you feeling?
Well.
How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you here?
That's difficult to answer.
Could you give me some idea?
Offhand, I can't.
Whose idea was it that you come here?
A psychiatrist.
And what happened that ended up with your being here in the hospital?
The psychiatrist decided that this was the situation for me.
Did he tell you why?
No, the psychiatrist did not.
Has anybody told you why?
No.
Have you any idea why?
Yes.
And what is that?
I'm not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them.
And in what way are you different?
I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do. And this influences my thinking and consequently my actions.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
I sit differently when I play the piano, and when I'm away from the piano I occasionally look differently from other people, and this has caused dislike from people.
They dislike you because you sit differently at the piano?
Yes.
What way do you sit at the piano that people would dislike you?
I cannot describe an illustration of how I sit.
And I can't imagine it, that it would make people angry at you, or at least dislike you. How do you know they dislike you?
My father does, and doctors do, because of the way I appear in relationship to the way I sit at the piano and occasionally stand when I'm away from the piano because of the way I sit at the piano.
How do you stand when you're away from the piano that they dislike you?
I can't describe an illustration.
Does it feel to you any different from the way other people stand?
Yes, it feels different.
In what way?
This is becoming too involved to describe.
Would I be right in assuming then that you don't feel that you belong in the hospital, but that other people did feel that?
As soon as I express the belief that I do not belong in this hospital, which is a mental hospital, then those who dislike me want to find a worse place for me.
I'm not sure I understand. Could you make that clear?
No.
Is this a way of...
Yes, I can. As soon as I express the belief that I do not belong in this mental hospital, then those who dislike me want to find a hospital where the living conditions are not as good as this.
But why are you in the hospital in the first place? I'm not clear.
Because I'm working to do something which, in my life, which most people do not do. This influences my thinking and occasionally my action. And a psychiatrist has noticed this.
What has he noticed?
Likes the actions and the thinking, and has decided that I should be here to change them.
What actions?
How I talk and how I look right at this moment.
And how would you describe the way you're talking and looking right at this moment?
As other people talk, and at this moment, however, I've been told that it is not the way other people talk and look.
Have you any idea in what way it's not like others?
No, because I believe it is as other people talk.
So then, from your point of view, not from other people's point of view, from your point of view, you look, you talk, you think, you behave as other people do. You're very interested in learning to play the piano. You sit at the piano a little differently from the way someone else might, and you stand somewhat differently.
Occasionally I stand differently.
Now that, in itself, doesn't seem on the surface to be sufficient reason for being in a hospital. So what other reasons have been given to you, or what other reasons do you understand are the causes of your being here?
I'm supposed to not be mentally well.
Oh. And what's supposed to be wrong with you?
No doctor has told me.
That's hard to believe.
I tell the truth.
What are your plans? If things should go well, you were to leave the hospital, then what?
I need financial help from my father to prepare me for obtaining a job as a piano instructor at a university where I will be able to teach people how to play the piano and also play the piano for people.
Have you had the training yet to permit you to be an instructor?
No, I have not.
Have you tried?
I don't understand what you mean.
Have you tried to get the instruction?
Yes, I have tried.
What's happened?
I have not had the correct environment for the instruction, nor the correct financial help for the instruction, nor the correct instruction.
Have you been accepted for such instruction?
By some teachers, yes.
And by others, no?
Yes. Again, it has been about half and half.
Have you started any such instruction with those who did approve of it?
Yes.
And how has it gone?
With some it has gone well, with some it has not gone well.
la piscina. No, my God, viene la zona, viene la zona. No sé si siempre es un poquito puro. Estilo de rotación, que duro, dice aquí que esté duro. Estamos duros, papá. Sí, compleja, 3D. Posición de la pantalla, nivel de brillo. Vamos a ponerle brillo a tope, que se vea la zona. Exactamente. A mí me encanta que se vea la zona. Porque este se llama Silent Hill y la zona del olvido. Hola Meritus, hola Doki Drum, bienvenido papá, estamos activos. Bienvenido a la zona del terror. Estamos esta noche chicos en Silent Hill y la zona del terror. Mierda, ahorita sí se ve bien. Vámonos. Medio Alan, ¿cómo estás bebé? Soy un bebé, dice Alan. Dice Daniel Morales, ¿cómo vas López? Un abrazo David Torres, bienvenido Alan, mierda. ¿Esto qué fue? Esto se puso bueno. Vamos a ver el mapa. Entramos en el 102, 102, 103. Vamos a irnos. Ahorita que me acuerdo tenía que venir hacia este lado. No me acuerdo a qué, pero tenía que venir, carajo. Tenía que venir. Bueno, si no estoy mal, la verdad.